Good Shabbos. I made a source sheet, but I'm told that many copies did not get made. So if you have the source sheet, you can pull out the source sheet. If not, I guess I'll be reading some of the source sheet. This Shabbat, in fact, our triennial, as we're in the second triennial of the Torah reading, began exactly with one of the most important stories in the entire Torah, and that is the story of the burning bush. And as a graduate of the Jewish Theological Seminary, where I went to rabbinical school, that is our logo, maybe even our mascot. We don't have a mascot, but the burning, and you can't see because it's a little far, but on my talit, this is the talit I received at my ordination, even have a burning bush on either side of the brachot. It's tiny, but it's there. So why is the burning bush so important, and what can it do to inspire us and remind us of what we need most right now? And that's what we're going to talk about today. And by the way, Solomon Schechter, the famous Solomon Schechter, the great Solomon Schechter, is the one who chose the burning bush as the logo for the Jewish Theological Seminary more than 100 years ago, because it stood for a passion for learning, a burning passion for Torah, and also the unchangeable level of our passion for Judaism. Rabbi Brad Artson, in his book, The Bedside Torah, talks about the burning bush and how that burning bush is still burning today. He calls it a small and simple bush that is constantly under attack, yet which strives nonetheless. An unimpressive plant becomes the preeminent symbol of the Jewish people. What an apt symbol, Rabbi Artson says. A tiny people that has suffered and endured attacks, hate, Hamas, Hezbollah, anti-Semitism, yet like the burning bush, we will never be consumed. Instead, we continue to do what Jews have always done, working to implement our sacred covenant with God, to make the world more ethical, compassionate, and godly, and I'll add, to be responsible for each other, for every Jew, and for every single person in this world. And Rabbi Artson ends his commentary with these words: the burning bush is still burning, giving off light. In our generation, in Israel, the catalyst for liberation and living our highest values. This is a special week on the Jewish calendar because one of our greatest modern-day rabbis, Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, this week actually marks both his birthday and his yortzeit. And it always falls within a week or two of Martin Luther King weekend. Rabbi Heschel is known for many things: an incredible writer, author, theologian, philosopher, considered a modern-day prophet. Rabbi Heschel is perhaps most known for his role in the civil rights movement as a Jewish leader who marched alongside Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who stood up for morality and for what was right and helped change our country and our world. Born in Poland in 1907, Rabbi Heschel grew up in a very Hasidic, a very Orthodox family. Both lines from both his mother and father were from some of the most famous Hasidic rabbis from the 1800s. And Rabbi Heschel thankfully fled Poland in 1939 and was able to come to America, first to London, and then in 1940 he took a post at HUC, at Hebrew Union College in Cincinnati, for the first 5 years of his time in America. And then in 1945 he moved to New York, to JTS, where I'm an alum, and he was a professor in the rabbinical school for the remainder of his career until his passing in the 70s. Rabbi Heschel is known for many books, but I wanted to share an excerpt from his book on Israel, called Israel, an Echo of Eternity, which Dr. Rafi Simon got from our own library, and later today I'll be returning it so you can get a copy. Rabbi Heschel wrote this book in the summer of 1967, which means immediately following the Six-Day War. Israel, an Echo of Eternity. And this is what he says, connecting to the burning bush. Sacred history is the collecting of threads of God's promise. The relation of the Jewish people to the land of Israel is itself living history. The love of the people for the land is an ongoing, powerful being together, even when we are living at a distance, a link, a being at home spiritually, an embrace that never tires, a hope that never ceases. Moses, tending the flock of his father-in-law Jethro, drove the flock into the wilderness and came to Horeb. An angel appeared to him in a blazing fire out of a bush. Moses gazed, and there was a bush aflame, yet the bush was not consumed. Moses said, I must turn and look at this marvelous sight. Why is the bush not consumed? Moses at the burning bush saw a permanence that defies destruction. And now Rabbi Heschel talks about modern times. We too, walking in the wilderness, arrive at times at the mountain of God and see the world, a burning bush, aflame with hatred, with envy, and with murder, and yet our world will never be consumed. The anxiety afflicting humanity has created a nightmare. Is history coming to an end, Heschel asks? Is there reason for hope today? And he ends with these words. We are God's stake in human history, talking about the Jewish people. We are the dawn and the dusk, the challenge and the test. Israel reborn is a renewal of the promise. History cannot come to an end as long as the promise exists. Rabbi Heschel sees the burning bush as a promise that we will never be defeated, our people will never be destroyed, that Israel will always be reborn and be permanent. And echoing the words of Rashi, the great medieval great commentator of the Torah, from the line about the burning bush, Rashi says this, what is God's true message at the burning bush? Imo anochi batzara, I will be with the Jewish people in their tsuris. Even if we are having difficulty, even if we are having tsuris, God will not leave us. And the words of Rabbi Simshon Raphael Hirsch, if you have this source sheet, it's number 5. The bush was not consumed. Anyone who opens their heart to God will not be destroyed, but rather will be bound up with God. As it were, I am a partner in their sorrow, God says. Even if we are not in a state of degradation, even if we are living surrounded by thorns, I, God, will be with them. I will share their suffering. I am them, even among the thorns. The idea about the burning bush and what the commentaries say is that even when the Jewish people, when Israel is surrounded by thorns, and perhaps we can say that's this moment right now, that God is always with us and God will always be with us, that we are survivors, perpetually attacked, but perpetually surviving. I'd like to share with you just for a moment, this week I had the opportunity to meet with a sister of a hostage in Israel, a hostage in Gaza. Shira Perez spent a short time here in Cleveland. She is 15 years old. She's in the 10th grade, and she is traveling the United States telling the story of her brother. Her family's story begins in South Africa, where she was born. 8 years ago, the family moved and made Aliyah to Israel. On October 7th, she was with her family in Yad Binyamin, which is a suburb of Tel Aviv, outside of Ashdod, equal distance between Tel Aviv and the northern border with Gaza. She is the youngest of 4 children in her family. Shira's oldest brother, Yonatan, had completed his army service recently and was to be wed on October 17th, 10 days after October 7th, to his bride, Galia. The family was so excited for the wedding. Her next brother, Daniel, was serving as an officer in the Tank Corps. October 7th, he was with his Tank Corps in his tank, stationed somewhere in Israel. The morning of October 7th, Yonatan, her older brother, his reserve battalion commander, put out a message on WhatsApp that anyone with a weapon should get in a car and drive to Sderot. What I didn't say is the Perez family is religious. They don't typically look at their phones on Shabbat, but his phone was lighting up, Yonatan, who's age 24. Yonatan immediately, of course, was ready to go to join his battalion. Her father said this, "You have a fiancé. You only have a handgun. There hasn't been an official call-up, just a WhatsApp message. Are you sure you're going to go?" And Yonatan said, quote, "If my battalion commander said anyone with a weapon is needed, then I am going." And he drove off. As Shira said, his 15-year-old youngest sister, "I was so proud of him, but as none of us knew what was really going on, I wasn't that worried about him." It happened later that day, Saturday afternoon, October 7th, that Yonatan called home saying, "I'm in the hospital, in Soroka Hospital in Beersheba. I was shot in the leg. The doctors say it's not serious." He, that morning, had driven to Sderot. He fought in Sha'ar HaNegev. He fought in Kfar Aza. He fought in Kibbutz Saad. And then finally at the Nahal Oz army base, the one where the observers were. All in all, he fought for 6 hours, and this is what Shira said. "He told me he had seen indescribable, unimaginable horror. He was worried about his fiancé's family in Kibbutz Saad." Later we heard that Yonatan saved many, many lives heroically fighting October 7th, and many of those who were fighting beside his side were killed. Within a day or two, when Yonatan got home to recover from his leg, getting shot in the leg, they started to figure out and try to find what happened to their younger brother, Daniel, because they hadn't heard anything about him. Finally, they heard a few days later that Daniel's tank was found. There are 4 soldiers that always serve in a tank. One of the 4 soldiers was dead. The other 3, including Daniel, were missing. At that point, it was clear that Daniel was missing in action, but Daniel was the officer, and the officer was always the most important. Shira said it was a painful moment that we'll never forget when we heard that Daniel was missing. We hugged, we cried. It was a very hard moment. But at this point, Yonatan was to be married about 5 days later. What would the family do? Would they have the wedding or would they postpone it? And they decided that in this moment of horror, they needed a moment of simcha, a moment of joy. We need smachot, Shira said, simchas, celebrations. In the midst of grieving a missing brother, another brother was wed. With joy and sadness, what she called the holiest day of her life and the saddest day of her life, seeing all of her siblings and parents standing at the chuppah without Daniel. But they celebrated and they cried. And then the next day, they were officially notified that Daniel was considered a hostage in Gaza, captured by Hamas terrorists along with 2 other members from his tank that were missing. Because he's an IDF officer, you won't actually see Daniel Perez's name on the websites, on the kidnapped posters, because IDF officers, there are 2, by the way, that are hostages, are considered very high value, and they don't want Hamas to necessarily know that they're officers that are in their hands. And as Shira said, now over 90 days, today it's 92 days, the 92nd day that they're in captivity, suffering. They don't really know what happened. It happened that their older brother, Yonatan, after recovering from his leg being shot and his wedding, returned to service, and he's serving in the reserves. And this is what Shira said, a 15-year-old, why she came to Cleveland earlier this week. One thing that I realize is that telling my story brings hope. It's one of thousands of stories in Jewish histories that captures who we are as a people. And this is how we are able to continue on, telling our story, meeting people who want to know what happened and feel close to us. It gives me strength, not only saying the horrible things that have happened, but also the light and the hope that has come out of it. A reminder that there is still light in this horrible situation. For me, that is who the Jewish people are. It's in our DNA to tell our story, to spread positivity, light, and hope. And Shira said that she still has hope. that there is a hope that everything will end well for her and her family. She said this, "These last 3 months have taught me several things, that I have literally grown up from a kid to be an adult in these 3 months. I've learned why we all need to serve in the army, and most important, that we all need each other now." She said, "We are brothers and sisters feeling the same pain, and yet, od lo avda tikvatenu, as we say in Hatikva, we have not lost hope." She said this, "I haven't seen my brother Daniel in 100 days, and yet I hold out hope that he will come home to us. And I know that you're hoping along with us, and for all the hostage. Od lo avda tikvatenu. We haven't lost our hope." It was obviously a difficult moment to be able to be there with Shira, and we give her a lot of strength. And I don't know how she can go on, but I wanted to share her story that she shared with me. Rabbi Heschel, in his book, shares these last words that I'd like to share. "Why did our hearts throughout the ages turn to Israel, to our holy land? Because of hope, because of memory, and because of distress. Hope is a power. Its vital quality is always at work, anticipating freedom from misery, a power of perception and intuition and of foreseeing. But hope cannot stand alone. It must be faithfully attended. It must not lose the element of constancy and the intensity of expectancy. Hope is not cheerfulness, a confidence that all will turn out for the best. Hope is a conviction that is rooted in trust, a promise, an ability to soar above darkness that overshadows us. The Bible says that we must be patient. God said God is a patient God. Perhaps the most Jewish characteristic quality of existence is hope, bitachon. Believe and hope are one. It's part of our existence to be faithful to the future, to keep alive the beginning by nurturing the vision of the end. Israel reborn is an answer of God who demands hope as well as action and expects tenacity as well as imagination. So this Shabbat, it's my hope and my prayer that the burning bush is still burning, giving off light and fueling our mission, reminding us as Jews, as Zionists, as human beings, that we must do all we can to free the captives, to stand for morality and right, to share their story, and to bring them all home. Shabbat Shalom.